I came home early because my boss finally said, "Take the day," and I thought I was about to win Husband of the Year with grocery bags cutting into my fingers. I opened the door and heard my wife laugh. Not her polite laugh. Not her work laugh. The one she saved for midnight movies and inside jokes. Then I saw the shoes by the couch. Men's shoes. Expensive, clean. Too confident to belong to a repair guy. I took one step into my own living room, and there he was, sitting next to my wife like he paid rent. Like my house was a waiting room, and I was late for my appointment. He had his arms stretched across the back of the couch. Casual, practiced. The kind of posture that says, "I have done this before." My wife did not jump. She did not scramble. She did not look guilty. She looked annoyed that I had interrupted. And that was the first moment my stomach dropped. Because surprise is human. Annoyance is choice. I heard myself say. "Who is that?" And my voice sounded calm enough to fool me for half a second. The stranger glanced at me and smiled like we were about to watch a game together. My wife answered before he did. She said, "Relax." And she said it the way people say relax right before they do the opposite. I set the grocery bags down slowly, because if I threw them, I would feel like the villain in my own story. I asked again, "Who is he? What is he doing in our house?" The stranger leaned forward like he wanted to help, like he was about to introduce himself at a neighborhood barbecue. But my wife cut him off with a sharp little laugh. She said, "Do not make this a scene." And that was when I noticed the details. Her phone face down on the coffee table. The screen still glowing like it had just been tossed. 2 wine glasses, both half full. A plate with cut strawberries, fancy, deliberate. Not something she ever did for me unless I begged for a date night. And on the back of the chair, a man's jacket, not mine. Darker, sleeker. The kind of jacket that looks expensive even when it is hanging like it owns the place. I looked at her and waited. She finally said his name. Marcus, like that would fix everything. Marcus gave me a small nod and said, "Man, I am sorry," as if apology could fit in the space between his knee and my wife's thigh. I stared at the distance between them. Because it was not a lot. And it was not an accident. My wife crossed her arms and said, "You were not supposed to be home yet." And it hit me that she had a schedule for my life that I did not know about. I said, "You planned this around me." She rolled her eyes. Yes, she rolled her eyes. Like I was the one being unreasonable. And she said, "Do not do that. Do not act like you have been perfect." Which was fascinating, because I had not accused her of anything out loud yet. My mind tried to grab the easy excuses. Maybe he is a cousin, maybe a coworker with a crisis, maybe a friend from a long time ago. But my wife did not offer any of those. She just defended him. She said, "Marcus is my friend." And she said friend the way people say investment when they mean gambling. I asked, "Since when do friends sit like that? Since when do friends drink wine in my living room at 2 in the afternoon?" Marcus cleared his throat and said, "I should go." And my wife snapped at him. "No, stay. You are not the problem." And she looked at me when she said it, like she wanted me to understand my role. Like I was an inconvenience, not a husband. My chest went hot, my hands went cold. I was seeing my life like a stranger's footage, a camera angle I never asked for. I tried to keep my voice steady. I said, "So you are choosing him. Right now, in front of me." She stood up, not to close the distance to me, but to stand in front of him, like a shield, like a statement. She said, "I am choosing myself." And that line would have been almost impressive if it had not been delivered from the spot where she used to greet me after work. I looked past her at Marcus, and I noticed he had no wedding ring, and his face held zero surprise, which meant this was not a mistake, this was routine. I asked him, "How long?" Marcus opened his mouth, and my wife said, "Do not answer that." And then she turned back to me and said something that rearranged my insides. She said, "You are overreacting." "It is not what you think." And I actually laughed, because what was I supposed to think? That he came over to discuss landscaping. That the strawberries were for a charity meeting. My laugh came out sharp, and I said, "You can stop." She stepped closer to me, finally, but not with softness, with control. She lowered her voice and said, "If you are going to act like this, maybe you should leave for a while." And right there, in my own living room, with grocery bags on the floor like evidence, she gave me an eviction notice. Marcus looked down at his hands like he was suddenly shy. The performance was almost cute. I felt something inside me click into place. Not rage, not despair, something cleaner, like a decision. I said, "Okay." And both of them blinked, because they expected shouting. They expected pleading. They expected me to bargain for my dignity like it was a discount item. Instead, I picked up the grocery bags, walked them into the kitchen, put the milk in the fridge, because I am not an animal. Then I came back and said, "I am going to pack." My wife followed me down the hall, barefoot, quiet. She hissed. "You are being dramatic," I said. "No, I am being efficient." I opened the bedroom closet and pulled out a suitcase, the big one we used for vacations, the one she used to label with cute little tags. I saw the tags and felt a weird sting, not love, memory. I started folding shirts, and while I did, my wife leaned in the doorway and said, "Where are you going to go, like my options were her or the street?" I said. "Anywhere you are not." And she scoffed. Then she said, "You are going to regret this." And that was the second moment my stomach dropped, because she did not say, "I am sorry." She did not say, "Please stay." She did not say, "Let us talk." She said, "Regret." Like she was already writing the story where she was the prize I lost, I zipped the suitcase and walked past her. Marcus had stood up now, and he tried to look respectful. He said, "Man, I did not mean," and I cut him off with a hand up. Because if I let him finish, I might learn something I could not unlearn yet. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, my jacket, and when I reached the door, my wife finally raised her voice. She said, "You cannot just leave." And I turned around and looked at her, really looked, and I realized I did not recognize the woman standing there. She was wearing the sweater I bought her last winter, the one she said made her feel safe, and she was standing in front of another man like safety was a prop. I said, "Watch me." Then I opened the door, stepped out, and I did not slam it. I closed it softly, because I was done giving her dramatic sound effects for her new life. And as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just one sentence. Short, bold, like a warning. It said, "Do not go back inside. Not yet." And I froze with my hand on the car door, because I suddenly knew this was not just a messy betrayal. This was a setup I had been living in without realizing it. And the worst part was, I had no idea who was trying to help me, or who was trying to control me next. I stood by my car, staring at the text like it was a crack in the pavement, and if I looked long enough, I would fall through it. "Do not go back inside. Not yet." It was not from my wife, not from a friend I had saved, not from anyone with a name attached. Just an unknown number and a sentence that landed too perfectly in the moment. I looked up at my living room window. The blinds were half open, and I saw movement, a shadow crossing, then stillness. I told myself to get in the car and go, so I did. But my hands were shaking in that quiet way people do when they are trying very hard to look normal. I drove without a plan at first, then ended up in the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store because it was bright and public and nobody there cared about my problems. I sat for a minute and checked my phone again. No follow-up, no explanation. Just that one line like a door slammed in my face. I texted back, "Who is this?" and watched the message sit there. Delivered, no reply. I called the number. Straight to voicemail. No personalized greeting. Just the robotic voice telling me the mailbox was not set up, which was honestly kind of impressive. like the number existed only for that one message. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my brain needed some kind of sound to cover the silence. I started listing possibilities. Maybe it was a neighbor who heard something. Maybe it was someone who saw Marcus arrive and felt guilty. Maybe it was Marcus himself trying to look like a hero after playing the villain. Or maybe it was my wife, using some burner number like she was starring in a show she did not qualify for. I drove to my brother Noah's place because I needed a roof and a witness. And Noah was the kind of person who would not ask for an emotional TED Talk. He would just open the door and say, "You hungry?" When he opened, he took one look at the suitcase and my face, and he stepped aside without a word. I walked in and sat on his couch, which felt like the universe making a joke. Noah said, "You look like you just watched your own funeral," I said. Close, I found my wife with a man on our couch. And before I could keep going, Noah said, "Say less." He walked to the kitchen and came back with 2 bottles of water like we were about to run a marathon. He sat across from me and waited. No dramatic reactions, no speech. Just his eyes saying, "I am here." So I told him everything. The shoes, the wine, the way she defended him like I was the guest. The way she told me to leave like I was a teenager who missed curfew. Noah listened and then said, "You did the right thing," and it should have felt good to hear that. But instead it made the room tilt. Because if I did the right thing, then this was real. And if this was real, then my life was officially divided into before and after. I pulled out my phone and showed him the message. Noah frowned. He said, "That is weird. Who would say not yet?" I said, "That is what keeps looping in my head. Not do not go back at all. Not yet, like there is a timer on my humiliation." Noah asked if I had checked our cameras, and I blinked because yes, we had cameras. I installed them after a string of car break-ins on our street, a doorbell cam and one inside facing the hallway. Mostly to catch packages and to prove to my wife that I was not paranoid. I opened the app, my hands steadier now because focus is the closest thing to peace. The doorbell footage showed Marcus arriving at 1:42. He did not look around like he was sneaking. He walked straight up, and my wife opened the door before he even knocked, like she was tracking him on a map. They walked inside close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. I felt my jaw clench. I skipped forward to the moment I arrived, and then the inside hallway camera went dark. Not a glitch, not a freeze, a clean cut. 1 minute it showed the hall, the next minute black. Then it came back on right after I left. Noah leaned closer. He said, "Someone turned it off," I said, "or someone scheduled it, because the cut was too neat." I scrolled further back, and the same thing happened on other days. Not often, but enough to make my stomach go cold. Every few weeks, the hallway camera would go offline for about 2 hours. Always in the afternoon, always while I was at work, always back online before I came home. I looked at Noah, and he looked at me, and neither of us said the obvious out loud, because saying it would make it heavier. Noah finally said, "She knew about the camera." I said, "Yeah." I told her the password, because I thought we were a team. Noah did not say "I told you so," which is why he is my brother and not my enemy. He just said, "What else do you share passwords for?" And I hated how fast my mind answered. The bank app, the cloud storage, the family laptop, our phone plans, the whole modern marriage starter pack. I stood up and started pacing, and Noah said, "Sit down, do not spiral." But I could not stop seeing the living room like a stage, the strawberries like props, the camera blackout like the director calling cut. I opened my email and searched for password change notifications. Nothing recent. But I noticed something else. A shipping confirmation from a courier service I did not recognize, sent 3 weeks ago, addressed to me, delivered to my home, signed by my wife. Item description, document envelope. My chest tightened. Noah asked what it was. I said, "I do not know." "But I never ordered it," Noah said. "Maybe it was junk," I said. "It was not junk if it needed a signature." I pulled up our joint bank account and scrolled. Trying to keep my breathing even, I found small charges I had never paid attention to, because they looked like nothing. $49 here, $22 there. Always to places with boring names, office supplies, printing, shipping, the kind of charges you ignore because adult life is full of boring charges, Noah said. She might be hiding money, I said, or moving it. I called the courier service number from the email, and the automated menu told me the tracking number was valid, delivered, recipient signature on file. I asked for proof of delivery by email, and they sent it in 2 minutes. The signature was my wife's name, neat and confident, like she was signing for groceries. I stared at it until the letters felt like teeth. Noah said, "What was in it?" I said. "Documents, supposedly," Noah said, "like divorce papers." And the air changed. Because that word made everything click into a new pattern. My wife telling me I would regret leaving, the camera blackouts, the secret shipping, Marcus acting like he belonged. It did not feel like a messy affair anymore. It felt like a plan. And I was the only person who did not have the schedule. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, a new message. It said, "Check your credit report tonight. Do not ignore this." I stared at it, then at Noah, and he said, "Okay, now we are definitely not sleeping." I laughed again, sharp and tired, because my heartbreak had just upgraded into something else. Something that could follow me into paperwork and numbers and my name on forms I never signed. And I realized I was not just leaving my marriage. I was walking into a puzzle someone built around me, and whoever was texting me either wanted to save me or wanted to steer me. And I had no intention of being anyone's puppet again. Noah pulled his laptop over and I logged into the credit bureau site with hands that looked steady but felt like they were made of glass. The page loaded slowly like it wanted to build suspense. Then the report opened and my stomach dropped again. 2 new credit cards in my name. Both opened 3 months ago, both with balances that were not cute, not small, not accidental. I stared at the addresses on file. One was my home, one was a mailbox rental across town. I did not rent any mailbox. Noah leaned in and said, "That is fraud, plain and simple." I scrolled further and saw an auto loan inquiry, recent, like last week. Then another inquiry from a leasing company. My wife had been shopping for something expensive using my identity, like it was a shared streaming account. I felt strangely calm, the way you feel when you stop guessing and finally see the monster in full daylight. I took screenshots, saved PDFs, made a folder called Evidence because my sense of humor was hanging by a thread. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number, one more line. "Tomorrow at noon, coffee shop on Pine and 8th. Come alone. Bring ID." I stared at the message and Noah said, "Absolutely not," I said. "I am not going alone." Noah said, "Good, because that is how people disappear in bad movies." I said, "Nobody is disappearing. I'm getting answers." I called my bank and flagged the cards. Then I called the credit bureau and started the dispute process. Each call took forever. Each hold song felt like an insult. By midnight, I had a case number, a fraud alert, and a new password for everything. Noah watched me work like he was watching a surgeon, and finally he said, "Do you think she did this with Marcus?" I said. "Marcus is either the brains or the distraction. Either way, he is too comfortable." Noah asked if I was going to reply to the meeting text. I typed one word, "Who," then deleted it, then typed, "I will be there," then deleted that too. Because I hated that they were setting the schedule again, I replied instead, "Name and reason." The answer came 5 minutes later. "I am Elena. I work at the leasing company. Your wife used your ID today." I froze, Noah said. "That sounds real," I said. "Or it sounds like the best lie." Then another message came. "I can prove it. You have 24 hours before the paperwork moves." I looked at Noah and said, "Fine. We go, we sit at a distance, you watch me. If anything feels off, I walk." Noah nodded, then said, "You know she will call when she notices the cards are frozen, like she will sense the air changing." And right on time, my phone lit up with her name, Then again, then again. I turned it face down, and for the first time since I left, I did not feel tempted. I felt ready. The next day, Noah parked across from Pine and 8th and watched the coffee shop like it owed him money. I walked in alone like I promised. But Noah was close enough to sprint. The place smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon. At a corner table, a woman lifted her hand. Late 20s, maybe. Sharp bun, tired eyes. A folder on the table like a warning label, she said. "You are Daniel," I said. "Yes." She slid the folder toward me and said, "I am Elena. I flagged the application because the signature looked traced, and because your wife would not stop rushing me. I opened the folder and saw copies of my driver license. Clean scans." My jaw tightened. Elena said, "She claimed you were out of town, and she had permission. She had a man with her, confident. Called you by your first name like he knew you." I said, "Marcus?" Elena nodded. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "They tried to lease a car in your name, then asked about moving the payment address to a mailbox." I asked. "Why warn me?" she said. "Because my dad got wiped out by identity theft, and because your wife smiled the whole time like it was normal." I felt my phone buzz, my ex again, call after call. Elena glanced at it and said, "She is sensing the door closing." I asked Elena for every detail, timestamps, names, camera angles. She wrote it down and said, "File a police report today and lock your accounts harder than you think you need." Then she added one last line that hit like ice. She said, "If you go back to the house alone, assume you are walking into a trap." I filed the police report that afternoon, gave them the credit accounts, the inquiries, the leasing attempt, Elena's notes. The officer looked bored until I mentioned the mailbox address. Then his eyes sharpened like he had seen that trick before. He said, "Do not confront her alone." I promised. Then drove past my old house anyway. Because curiosity is a loud roommate. The porch light was on in daylight, which was weird, and there was a new camera by the door. Not mine, aimed straight at the driveway like someone wanted a clean shot of whoever arrived. I parked a block away and watched. Marcus came out carrying a small safe, the kind you buy at office stores. He loaded it into his trunk like it was a gym bag. Then my wife stepped out behind him with a folder. She kissed his cheek like it was a business deal. Then she noticed something. She turned and stared down the street. Not at me exactly, but close enough that my skin prickled. I sank lower in the seat and waited. They drove off together, and the moment the street went quiet, I called Noah. I said, "They are moving things. Physical things." Noah said, "Like paperwork." "Like cash," I said, "like my life in a box." Noah told me to come back, but I could not. I walked up to my own front door like a stranger and did not go in. I just looked at the new camera and realized she had upgraded her security. Not for safety, for control. My phone buzzed again, a text from my ex. Finally, not a call, it said. "We need to talk. Come home tonight." I stared at that word home, then typed back one line. "You gave that up." Then I turned around and left before my anger made decisions for me. The calls started like clockwork. First 1, then 3, then 10, all from her. 6 months had passed and I had rebuilt my life into something quieter. My accounts were locked. My case was moving. My name felt like mine again. I never replied. Then one evening my doorbell rang, and through the peephole I saw her, hair pulled back, eyes puffy, wearing the same soft sweater like it was a costume she thought I missed. I opened the door with the chain on. She said, "Daniel, please, I made a mistake," I said. "You made a plan." She flinched. She held up her hands and said, "Marcus is gone." "I have nothing," I said. "You had me and you traded it." She started crying, but I stayed calm. I said, "You do not get to break someone and then ask for a reset," she whispered. "Just talk to me," I said. "I am talking. This is the answer." She tried to step closer and the chain caught. The sound was small, but it was enough to remind us both there was a boundary now. She said he lied to me, he took money, he used me, I said. And you used me first. She shook her head like denial could rewrite bank records. She said I was lonely. I said you were dishonest. She said I did not think you would leave. And that was the truth slipping out. Not love, not regret. Just surprise that I chose myself. I told her the police report was filed. The fraud case was active. The leasing company cooperated. The mailbox was traced. Marcus did not vanish. He just ran out of places to hide. Her face went pale. She whispered, "Are you trying to ruin me?" I said, "No, I am refusing to ruin myself to protect you." She asked for one more chance. I said, "I will give you one thing." Then I slid a paper through the gap, a list of free legal aid contacts and a note that said, "Stop calling or my lawyer will." She stared at it like it burned. Then she looked up and said, "You really do not miss me." I said, "I miss the person I thought you were." Then I closed the door, locked it, and walked back into my life like I had finally changed the locks on my own heart. And that was the last thing I ever gave her. Access denied. Forever.